Margaret sat alone in her living room, the soft glow of the lamp casting warm shadows across the walls, while outside, rain fell steadily, drumming a quiet rhythm against the window panes, a sound that had always comforted her but tonight made the silence feel heavier, almost like the house itself was holding its breath with her. She cradled her teacup, feeling the warmth seep into her hands, and thought about how different her life had become since her husband passed away, how the days stretched long and lonely, and how even her grandchildren, busy with their own lives, visited less often than she wished, leaving her with memories that were both comforting and painfully empty. The clock ticked past 10, and she considered calling it a night, ready to retreat to bed, when a gentle knock interrupted her thoughts, soft yet insistent, echoing through the quiet house in a way that made her heart skip unexpectedly, because at this hour, no one usually came. She rose slowly, her joints complaining as she moved, and went to the door, wondering who could possibly be there at nearly 11 o'clock, and when she opened it, she froze for a moment, caught between surprise and delight, seeing Daniel, her grandson, standing in the rain, his hair damp, cheeks slightly flushed, and a hesitant, almost nervous smile on his face, a sight that made her chest tighten with a mixture of concern and joy. "Grandma. I know it's late," he said softly, his voice carrying a tone that was both apologetic and earnest, and she noticed how much he had grown, how his once boyish features had begun to mature into something more defined, more thoughtful, and there was a depth in his eyes that made her pulse quicken, a subtle vulnerability that tugged at her heart, urging her to welcome him in without hesitation. She stepped aside, letting him enter, and immediately the warmth of the house embraced him, mixing with the faint scent of tea and the lingering aroma of lavender from the small vase on the coffee table, a comforting contrast to the chill and wetness clinging to his clothes, and she guided him to the sofa, offering a blanket she quickly draped over his shoulders, noticing the way he hesitated, as if unsure how to accept care from her without appearing weak, and it reminded her that even young adults carried burdens she could never fully imagine, burdens that sometimes only came to light in quiet, unplanned moments like this. As he settled into the sofa, shaking off the wetness from his coat and shoes, Margaret poured him a cup of hot tea, handing it to him with a gentle smile, and they shared a brief, almost shy glance, a silent acknowledgement of the trust that existed between them, a trust she had built over years of shared stories, birthdays, and simple afternoons, yet now felt deeper, almost sacred, as if the late hour and the storm outside had stripped away the usual barriers and allowed a rawer connection to emerge, one that neither had anticipated. Daniel took a tentative sip of the tea, the warmth spreading through him, calming some of the tension he had carried all evening, and he looked around the room with a mixture of nostalgia and longing, taking in the familiar furniture, the bookshelves filled with titles he had once loved as a child, the photographs lining the mantelpiece that told the story of a family he had been proud to be part of yet sometimes felt distant from, and in that quiet observation, Margaret realized he was not just visiting out of habit or obligation, but because something inside him had driven him here tonight, something urgent or unresolved that he needed to share, and she felt a flutter of anticipation mixed with apprehension, sensing that this night might bring more than casual conversation, that it might reveal truths that had been kept hidden until now. The rain continued outside, sometimes tapping harder, sometimes fading into a whisper, and the rhythmic sound seemed to mirror the rising tension in the room, the way her heartbeat quickened with every subtle movement he made, every slight pause in his speech, and she noticed how he avoided her gaze briefly before looking back, as if measuring how much to reveal, as if testing the waters of intimacy that only family and time could allow, and Margaret, feeling a mix of protective instinct and curiosity, leaned slightly forward, encouraging him to speak, ready to catch every word he would offer. For a moment, neither spoke, the silence stretching, heavy with meaning, and Margaret thought about all the times she had imagined such moments, when a grandchild would come to her not for games or advice about school, but for something deeper, something that touched the heart, and now, facing it in reality, she felt both fear and excitement, a rare combination that made the night feel charged, alive, almost magical in its intimacy. Daniel finally cleared his throat, a small, almost inaudible sound that made her lean in slightly, and began in a soft, halting voice, saying, "Grandma. I've been thinking a lot lately about life, about everything I'm feeling, and I needed to talk to someone who would understand." Margaret nodded gently, her eyes warm and encouraging, sensing that this was not just a casual conversation, that he had wrestled with his thoughts long before stepping out into the storm, and she felt honored and humbled that he had chosen her as the one to confide in, her heart swelling with love, compassion, and a touch of sorrow for the struggles he carried silently. She gestured toward the armchair across from him, inviting him to sit more comfortably if he wished, and Daniel shifted slightly, settling in while avoiding direct eye contact for a moment, gathering courage, and she watched him, noting the subtle signs of nervousness, the way his fingers fidgeted with the edge of the blanket, the slight tightening of his jaw, the soft intake of breath before he spoke again, and she realized that whatever he was about to share would be significant, a turning point in their relationship, a moment that could deepen the bond between them in ways that neither had imagined. The storm outside seemed to intensify suddenly, rain lashing against the windows, wind rustling the trees, and it mirrored the sudden rush of emotions in the room, anticipation, nervousness, care, and the quiet thrill of connection, the way shared vulnerability could make two hearts feel closer than they had in years. Margaret's mind wandered briefly, recalling all the late-night talks she had had with her own children when they were young, the laughter and tears that had passed between them, the feeling of being entrusted with secrets that were sacred and fragile. And she understood that this night was much the same, only now it was her grandson, older, more complex, more burdened by the world, seeking solace, guidance, or simply a listener who would truly hear him. Daniel finally raised his eyes to meet hers, and in that gaze, Margaret felt the weight of unspoken stories, the depth of feelings he had carried alone, and a gentle ache grew in her chest, an aching mix of empathy, love, and anticipation, knowing that what he was about to say might change the way she saw him, might change the closeness between them, might bring them to a place of shared understanding neither had experienced before. She offered a reassuring smile, squeezed his hand gently, and whispered, "You can tell me anything, Daniel," and as the words left her lips, she felt a sense of quiet electricity, as if the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for the revelation to come, waiting for the moment that would define this night, a night that had started like any other, quiet and solitary, yet had transformed into something profound, intimate, and filled with the promise of truth, connection, and unexpected emotional discovery. And as Daniel took a deep breath, preparing to speak, Margaret felt the first stirrings of something she hadn't anticipated, not just the concern of a grandmother for her grandson, but a deeper, richer emotion, a recognition of his humanity, his courage, and the delicate beauty of moments when hearts meet in honesty and vulnerability, the kind of moments that linger long after the rain stops, long after the tea is finished, long after the night ends, leaving only the warmth of understanding, love, and the beginning of a story neither would forget. The storm outside had softened to a quiet drizzle, the gentle patter of rain against the windows creating a steady, calming rhythm as Margaret and Daniel settled deeper into the living room, the cozy warmth of the space wrapping around them like a protective hug, and Margaret could feel the tension in Daniel's shoulders, the way his fingers fidgeted with the edge of the blanket she had draped over him, a subtle sign that whatever he was about to share was heavy on his heart, and she knew instinctively that this was a moment of truth, a moment that could change everything between them, yet she waited patiently, letting him find the words in his own time, offering only her quiet presence, her soft nods, and the occasional reassuring squeeze of his hand to let him know she was there fully, without judgment, without interruption, simply listening and witnessing the raw vulnerability of someone she loved dearly. And in that silence, Daniel finally spoke, his voice trembling at first, low and hesitant. "Grandma, there are things I haven't told anyone, feelings I've been carrying alone, choices I've been scared to make, moments when I felt lost, and I didn't know who to turn to." And Margaret's chest tightened as she realized the depth of his struggle, the invisible burdens he had borne in silence, the nights he had wrestled with thoughts too heavy to share with friends or even his parents, and she felt a rush of compassion, pride, and sorrow all at once, knowing that the boy she had watched grow up had become a young man shaped by experiences that had tested his heart and mind far beyond her ability to protect him, yet she also felt honored that he trusted her enough to confide in her now, in the quiet hours of the night, after a rainstorm, in the intimacy of a living room filled with soft lamplight and the lingering scent of tea, a place that felt safe enough for truth to emerge. As he continued, his words grew more precise, more open, revealing moments of loneliness that had shadowed his days, small heartbreaks that he had pretended didn't matter, dreams he had quietly nurtured but never shared, aspirations that felt too fragile to voice aloud, and Margaret listened intently, her heart swelling with a mix of admiration and gentle ache, feeling the emotional weight of his words press on her chest while also recognizing the courage it took for him to speak, the bravery in exposing a soul so tender, so unshielded, and she realized that this night was not just about the revelations he would share, but about the bond forming between them, a connection that transcended typical family relationships, a meeting of hearts at the point of raw honesty, a shared space where understanding and empathy flowed freely, uninterrupted by distractions or the busy pace of the outside world. Daniel paused briefly, his gaze dropping to the floor, the light from the lamp catching the moisture in his eyes, and Margaret felt an urge to bridge the distance, to ease the heaviness, to let him know that no matter the words, no matter the confessions, she would not turn away, and she did so by simply reaching out and brushing a strand of damp hair from his forehead, a small gesture loaded with tenderness and reassurance, a silent promise that he was not alone, that he never had to carry these feelings in silence again, and as he looked up at her, a flicker of relief and gratitude softened the lines of tension on his face, and in that look, Margaret sensed a deep trust forming, a trust that could withstand storms, mistakes, and the complicated layers of life, because it was rooted in honesty, in love, in the quiet, patient presence of someone who cared without conditions or judgment. He began to speak again, this time more steadily, sharing stories of moments when he felt invisible among peers, when success seemed just out of reach, when friendships had faltered, and when his heart had longed for guidance he hadn't known where to find, and Margaret felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, not just for his struggles, but for the resilience she saw shining through them, the courage that often went unnoticed by the world but was now fully visible to her, illuminated by the honesty he offered, and she found herself marveling at the depth of his soul, the way his emotions carried both fragility and strength, a combination that left her both breathless and quietly proud. The conversation meandered naturally, flowing from past regrets to present uncertainties, and Margaret noticed how Daniel's posture softened, how the tension in his shoulders eased, and how laughter began to surface amidst the tears, small chuckles that were both relief and release, the way humans sometimes laugh to acknowledge pain without letting it define them, and she joined in those moments, her own laughter mingling with his, creating a sound that filled the room with warmth, a counterpoint to the storm that had raged outside only hours before, and as the rain continued in its gentle rhythm, she felt a sense of closeness, a profound intimacy, the kind that comes from shared vulnerability, from witnessing someone's heart and being entrusted with it without reservation, and she realized that this was a gift far beyond words, a rare and precious connection that would linger long after the night ended. Daniel spoke of dreams he had kept secret, dreams of travel, of art, of building a life that felt meaningful, and Margaret encouraged him with soft affirmations, offering perspectives only age and experience could bring, yet doing so without judgment or the urge to impose, simply guiding, simply witnessing, simply loving, and in those moments, Daniel's eyes shone with a mixture of hope and relief, the unburdening of a heart that had carried too much alone finally finding a safe landing place. And Margaret felt her own heart respond in ways she hadn't expected, swelling with affection, protective instincts, and a gentle, tender longing for the young man he was becoming, a longing not romantic but profound, a desire to nurture, to witness, and to share in the journey of his life as it unfolded. The hours slipped by unnoticed as they moved through the layers of conversation, past and present weaving together seamlessly, the storm outside a fading memory as the storm within found release through dialogue, confession, laughter, and tears, and Margaret marveled at how a simple late-night visit, unplanned and spontaneous, could carry such weight, such emotional resonance, that it could transform the ordinary into the extraordinary, the quiet into something almost sacred, and she realized that sometimes the most profound moments in life arrive without warning, arriving in a knock at the door, in a hesitant smile, in a quiet confession, in the trust placed in one heart by another, and she felt a renewed sense of purpose, a recognition that her presence mattered more than she had imagined, that her willingness to listen, to understand, and to hold space for Daniel's truth was not only comforting him but also enriching her own life in ways subtle, lasting, and deeply emotional. As Daniel finally paused, exhaustion in his posture but relief in his expression, Margaret noticed the subtle changes, the way his shoulders had relaxed, the way his eyes seemed lighter, the way a faint smile lingered on his lips, and she understood that this night had shifted something irrevocably between them, a bond deepened, a trust established, a shared recognition of vulnerability and courage, and she felt a quiet, emotional satisfaction, a soft warmth spreading through her chest that spoke of love, of family, and of the power of being fully present when another soul needs to be seen, heard, and understood. The night wore on, but neither noticed the passing hours, the tea long finished, the rain outside reduced to soft drizzles that barely tapped the windows, because inside, the living room had become a sanctuary of truth, a space where hearts met in honesty, where emotions were honored, where the quiet courage of a young man speaking his truth was met with unwavering compassion and support. And Margaret knew that this was only the beginning, that the revelations shared tonight would shape their relationship in ways beautiful and enduring, that Daniel's willingness to open his heart would lead to deeper connections, not just with her but with the world, and that her own heart had been awakened, reminded of the profound importance of presence, patience, and love in its many forms. And as they finally sat back, the silence between them no longer heavy but comforting, Margaret felt a calm assurance, a gentle anticipation for the moments yet to come, and a deep, abiding gratitude for a grandson brave enough to come in from the rain and share his soul with her, transforming a simple late-night visit into a night of emotional revelation, connection, and the quiet, enduring beauty of shared human experience. The rain outside had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the pale moonlight, and inside Margaret's living room, a soft golden glow from the lamp illuminated the quiet space, but the warmth was nothing compared to the current that ran through her heart as she watched Daniel shift slightly on the sofa, a contemplative look in his eyes that made her feel both protective and unexpectedly tender, as if this was no longer simply a late-night visit but a turning point in their relationship, a moment where truths and emotions intertwined so intricately that neither time nor distance could separate them. And Margaret realized with a strange flutter that she had never felt her own heart respond in such a gentle, profound way to the honesty of another person, not even in the many years since her husband had passed, when love had once been the center of her life, and now, here in the quiet of the night, it was rediscovered in a wholly different, quieter form, a form that resonated with admiration, longing, and the deep satisfaction of witnessing someone's courage in laying bare their soul. Daniel spoke again, his voice steadier now, more confident, as if the act of sharing had released a fraction of the weight he had carried alone for so long, and Margaret leaned closer, sensing the intensity beneath his calm exterior, the dreams, the fears, the vulnerabilities that had once been hidden behind polite smiles and measured words now emerging in gentle bursts of confession, and she felt a shiver of emotion sweep over her, a mixture of empathy, fascination, and something almost indescribable, a recognition of the beauty in a soul willing to expose itself fully to another, and she could not help but admire the depth of his mind and heart, the way he navigated life with both sensitivity and quiet strength, a balance that made her heart ache with the awareness of how fleeting and precious these moments truly were. He told her about his hopes for the future, hopes he had whispered only to himself, dreams of creating, of connecting, of feeling seen and understood, and Margaret felt herself leaning in involuntarily, her eyes locking with his, her pulse quickening in a way that surprised her, not from romantic desire in the conventional sense, but from the emotional intimacy, the resonance of two hearts meeting in truth, the subtle, powerful bond that comes from seeing the essence of another person, their fears, their beauty, their longing, and recognizing it as something sacred, fragile, and worthy of protection. And in that moment, she realized how rare it was to feel such closeness, to feel as though the world outside had vanished, leaving only this room, this time, this connection, and that sometimes love and deep attachment did not need labels or gestures to be real. It existed simply in the shared understanding, the unspoken care, the vulnerability held in mutual presence. As Daniel spoke about past heartbreaks, moments of feeling unseen, decisions he had second-guessed, and regrets he had carried silently, Margaret's heart ached for him, for the young man who had navigated life with quiet bravery, who had faced loneliness and fear and now had chosen to show her the core of his being. And she felt a swelling of pride and tenderness that was almost overwhelming, a recognition of his humanity and resilience, the kind that inspires deep, lasting affection without expectation, without need for reciprocation beyond the acknowledgement of shared experience, and she found herself offering soft words of comfort, small reassurances, gentle nods, and the occasional squeeze of his hand, her gestures speaking more than her words could, creating a cocoon of safety and understanding that allowed him to continue revealing layers of himself, each confession building on the last, each pause giving room for reflection, for absorption, for the recognition of the gravity and beauty of the moment. He talked about feelings he had kept secret, feelings of longing not only for companionship but for understanding, for a place where he could belong without pretense or masks, and Margaret felt a stirring in her chest, a recognition of how human this desire was, how it resonated with her own hidden needs for connection, for relevance, for the affirmation that life could still hold deep, meaningful emotional experiences even in the quiet of later years, even after loss and solitude had settled in, and she realized that the bond between them was deepening in ways subtle and powerful, shaped by trust, by patience, by the willingness to be fully present and fully seen, and it made her heart ache in a tender, almost romantic way, not in the sense of passion but in the sense of profound emotional intimacy that touches the soul and lingers long after the moment passes. The conversation grew more personal, more intricate, as Daniel shared moments of self-doubt, experiences of love lost, opportunities he had hesitated to take, and dreams deferred, and Margaret listened intently, marveling at his honesty, feeling both sorrow and pride, understanding that these revelations were a gift of trust, a rare and precious offering that transformed the night into a sanctuary of emotion, a place where vulnerability was honored, where hearts could meet and resonate without fear or judgment, and she felt her own emotions intertwine with his, a quiet empathy that was as electrifying as it was comforting, a recognition that human connection, when genuine and fearless, could awaken feelings in unexpected ways, a reminder of the richness of life and the depths of the heart that often go unnoticed. She encouraged him gently, offering observations from her own life, subtle lessons learned through years of experience, while allowing him the space to process his words, to reflect, to absorb, to speak freely without interruption, and in this delicate dance of giving and receiving, both hearts felt seen, understood, and profoundly connected, a bridge of empathy and shared humanity that transcended age, circumstance, and time, and Margaret felt a sense of awe at how a single late-night visit, a single act of courage, could create such an indelible mark on the soul, forging a bond that was both tender and enduring, intimate yet entirely wholesome, emotionally charged but fully safe and nurturing, and she realized that the emotional resonance of this moment would linger long after he left, a memory of trust, honesty, and shared vulnerability that neither would ever forget. Daniel's voice softened, his tone carrying both relief and quiet wonder as he continued to speak about his aspirations, the parts of himself he had never dared reveal, the moments when he had felt invisible yet longed to be noticed for who he truly was, and Margaret felt a gentle warmth sweep through her, a mixture of pride, compassion, and that subtle, stirring recognition of how deeply two souls can touch without physical intimacy, how love can manifest as attentive presence, empathy, and the courage to hold space for another's truth, and she marveled at how profoundly moving it was to witness someone fully embrace their own vulnerability, to see their heart open as if for the first time, and to realize that the bond forged in these moments could be transformative, shaping both giver and receiver in ways that quietly reshape perception, feeling, and understanding. The hours passed almost unnoticed, time bending around them as words flowed, emotions shifted, laughter mixed with tears, the subtle beauty of honesty creating a rhythm that was at once soothing and exhilarating, a shared cadence of heartbeats and spoken truths, of confessions and understanding, of emotional intimacy that neither expected yet both welcomed, and Margaret felt an almost dizzying awareness of the depth and richness of this night, the magic of human connection in its purest form. The rare alchemy of trust, vulnerability, and mutual recognition that leaves the soul both lighter and fuller, more open and more alive. Daniel eventually paused, breathing deeply, a soft smile lingering on his lips, eyes glistening, a mixture of exhaustion and relief settling over him, and Margaret reached over instinctively, resting her hand over his, offering silent acknowledgement of everything he had shared, the gravity of the moment, the strength it took to speak, and the beauty of their bond, a bond that transcended conventional family ties and spoke instead to the profound, gentle, romantic undertone of human connection. Of hearts meeting and holding space for one another in ways rare and unforgettable, and she felt a tender ache in her chest, a recognition that life could still surprise, still touch the heart in unexpected ways, still bring new depth to love, care, and intimacy, even in quiet, ordinary nights made extraordinary by courage, trust, and the courage to speak one's truth. And as the room settled into quiet once again, she realized that this late-night conversation, this unfolding of heart to heart, had shifted something irrevocably, creating a bridge between them that would carry forward, shaping every interaction, every thought, every shared memory from this point onward, a delicate, enduring thread of trust, love, and mutual understanding that would linger, quietly powerful, for the rest of their lives. The storm had completely passed, leaving the world outside glistening under the soft silver glow of the moon, the air fresh and scented with rain-soaked earth. But inside Margaret's living room, the atmosphere remained charged, heavy with the aftermath of confession, honesty, and connection, and as Daniel sat quietly, hands wrapped around the warm mug Margaret had refilled without him noticing, he felt a strange mixture of relief, comfort, and something almost indescribable, a sense that he had laid down the burdens of the past few years and now found himself in a space that was both safe and emotionally intimate, where judgment had no place and empathy flowed freely, and Margaret watched him with a tenderness that made her heart ache in the best possible way, an ache that carried the weight of love, care, understanding, and that quiet, almost electric thrill of witnessing someone fully reveal themselves without reservation, a feeling she hadn't known she could experience again in her later years, yet here it was, glowing softly in her chest, a warmth that rivaled even the lamplight that bathed the room. She noticed how Daniel's shoulders, once stiff with tension and self-consciousness, had relaxed, how his gaze had softened, and how every now and then a small, almost shy smile crossed his lips, a smile that spoke of comfort, trust, and the relief of having someone witness the raw, unpolished truth of his heart, and Margaret felt a deep, quiet gratitude that the universe had allowed this late-night visit, unplanned, spontaneous, to become something far more meaningful than either of them could have imagined, a turning point where a bond was solidified, emotions were shared without fear, and hearts aligned in a subtle yet profound way, a recognition of humanity, of vulnerability, and of the beauty that arises when two people meet without pretense. Daniel finally broke the silence, his voice low but steady, tinged with gratitude and a quiet awe. Grandma, I don't think I've ever felt this, understood, and Margaret's chest swelled, her eyes glistening, because she recognized that understanding, true understanding, was one of life's rarest gifts, one that could heal, transform, and connect in ways nothing else could, and she simply reached over, gently resting her hand over his, offering a silent affirmation of shared experience, of presence, and of unwavering support, a gesture that conveyed more than words ever could, and Daniel responded with a subtle squeeze, a quiet acknowledgement of the trust and bond that had grown in the span of a single night, a bond built on honesty, openness, and the willingness to meet another soul fully, a bond that was both innocent and mature, tender yet powerful, and it left both of them feeling lighter, warmer, and more intimately connected than either had anticipated when the evening began. As the minutes stretched into hours, the room seemed suspended in time, the soft hum of the city outside barely audible, the lingering scent of tea and rain filling the air, and the quiet rhythm of their shared breathing becoming a subtle heartbeat of the night, a constant reminder that connection had been established, that hearts had met and spoken in a language older than words, a language of empathy, recognition, and gentle, unspoken love, a love that was not romantic in the conventional sense but carried undertones of admiration, longing, and the deep emotional resonance that comes from truly knowing another person, fully, without expectation or reservation, and Margaret felt a delicate thrill at the realization that this connection would linger, echoing in memory, shaping conversations, interactions, and emotions for years to come. Daniel spoke next of his dreams and fears, his voice carrying a fragile honesty, a vulnerability that Margaret could feel in her bones, the kind of honesty that opens the door to trust and intimacy in ways subtle and lasting, and she encouraged him gently, offering reflections drawn from her own experiences, guiding without directing, listening without interrupting, and providing a safe harbor for emotions to flow freely, and in response, Daniel's face softened, a quiet relief settling over him. A release that only comes when one's heart feels truly seen, recognized, and embraced, and Margaret felt a rush of emotion, an almost dizzying awareness of how profound and rare such moments were, a recognition of how deeply human connection could touch the heart, awaken dormant feelings, and remind one of the beauty and fragility of life itself. The night deepened further, yet neither noticed the passing hours, the space between them filled with quiet understanding, gentle laughter, and the occasional reflective pause, each moment reinforcing the bond they had built, the bridge of trust that now spanned their relationship, connecting past and present, experience and hope, heart and heart, and Margaret marveled at how unexpectedly powerful a single evening could be, how a late visit, a hesitant smile, and a willingness to speak honestly could transform loneliness into companionship, anxiety into relief, and fear into something tender, meaningful, and emotionally resonant, and she realized that these moments, small as they might seem to the world, were in fact the essence of human experience, the quiet magic that gives life depth, color, and enduring significance. Daniel's voice softened further, sharing reflections he had never dared voice aloud before, his confessions carrying both weight and beauty, and Margaret listened, enraptured, feeling every word like a thread weaving between them, binding them together in a tapestry of understanding, empathy, and shared humanity, a tapestry that would remain vivid in memory long after the night ended, a reminder that emotional truth, when met with compassion, could create bonds far stronger than time, distance, or circumstance, bonds that leave the heart expanded, the spirit soothed, and the soul quietly enriched. She offered gentle reassurances, small smiles, and the occasional touch of her hand to his, each gesture carrying more meaning than words could convey, affirming the trust and love that now existed between them, and Daniel responded with subtle gestures of his own, leaning slightly closer, allowing himself to feel the warmth and acceptance radiating from her presence, and in those small, almost imperceptible movements, the night seemed to stretch and pause simultaneously, holding them in a delicate balance of connection and revelation, intimacy and propriety, tenderness and respect, and Margaret understood that this delicate interplay was the essence of human connection at its finest, a quiet, almost sacred dance of hearts recognizing, embracing, and affirming one another. Hours passed, marked only by soft silences, shared smiles, and the quiet sighs of relief and understanding, the world outside forgotten, the living room transformed into a sanctuary where emotions could flow, hearts could speak, and trust could grow unchallenged, and Margaret felt a swell of pride, love, and gentle longing, a recognition that life had gifted her a rare treasure, a night where heart met heart, vulnerability was honored, and connection blossomed in the most beautiful and unexpected way, a night that would linger in memory as both a beginning and a culmination, a moment when the ordinary became extraordinary, when a simple late-night visit revealed truths, stirred emotions, and created a bond that would endure beyond words, beyond hours, beyond the quiet of the night, shaping both their lives in subtle, meaningful, and unforgettable ways. As Daniel finally rose to leave, the room still glowing softly, the remnants of tea and warmth lingering, he hugged Margaret gently, a hug full of emotion, gratitude, and unspoken promises, and she held him a moment longer than usual, feeling the weight and beauty of the connection they had forged, the trust that had been built, and the emotional depth that had been shared, a bond that was tender, profound, and forever marked by honesty, vulnerability, and love in its purest, most human form. And as she watched him step into the quiet night, umbrella in hand, disappearing into the moonlit streets, Margaret felt a calm, lingering joy, a soft ache of longing, and the deep satisfaction of knowing that this night, this late visit, had revealed something neither of them would ever forget, the transformative power of truth, the enduring beauty of emotional connection, and the quiet magic of a heart fully seen and fully understood.